Welcome to the Big Debate in partnership with the Big Apple Sports Network. I'm Ronnie Piper, and as you can see, I am not joined by Luke today. He's off counting the sheep somewhere in his home, but I'm very glad to be joined by three brilliant members of our family at the RBNY UK. However, in all seriousness, we're going to do a brief silence to just in a memorial for the 9/11's 20th anniversary. So rather than rolling our titles this week, we're just going to fall silent in remembrance for everyone who is affected and lost their life during this time. And welcome to the big debate. I'm very glad to be joined by Bryan, Graham, and Anthony. But first of all, let's introduce Anthony. How are you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing good. Surviving the hurricanes that are here in New York, which are unprecedented for most of us. But doing good on our part and ready to hopefully have this team do us proud on 9/11.
Uh, I really do hope so. And moving on to our next guest, making his debut on the RBNY UK podcast. Welcome, Graham. How are you doing?
Pretty
Doing
good,
pretty well.
Ronnie.
I'm trying to fix the fact that my camera is not working at the same time, but I'm here very well. So thank you. Hope everyone else is fine.
No, it's not too bad. And last but not least, Graham, how are you doing?
Pretty good, Ronnie. Sorry I interrupted Brian.
No
I
worries.
was like, I'm making my debut too. But yeah, I have mixed feelings about the game on Saturday. It's DC, so you never know, but trying to keep the faith.
But the faith has been keeping us alive for quite a lot of this season. Obviously, I'm not going to start getting into how many points we're off the top because I did look at that and it was very, very depressing. So it is 30 points if anyone wanted to know. But the reason why we've changed this podcast up is because we are having a very interesting season. Obviously, it was part of a rebuild, but we're not doing well. In all fairness, right? Okay, we've had 2 games called off for rain or thunder. Fair enough, that's whatever. But performances have not been quite there, and some players are just not seeming how they did at the beginning of the season. So, first talking point, I'm going to start with our two lovely strikers, the Brazilian and the Pole, Klimala and Fabio. It's a very interesting one, and I'd be very intrigued to see how you three feel about them because both of them I was excited at the beginning, but it seems like now it's not hit the rock, so to speak. But there's been a few instances, especially in the last game, where a certain Klimala started to run for the ball and then just stopped and didn't really get it, but it hasn't quite seemed to hit the ground running either. And so coming to you, Bryan, on Klimala and Fabio, obviously started the season well. We was looking forward to it. How are you finding their debut season in the MLS, and how do you think they're getting on now?
Well, I went through some of the stats that I could on the RBNY website. I was kind of shocked that Klamalik does have at least one more goal than Fabio. Klamala has 4, and Fabio, of course, has 3. Neither of them, I mean, it's not the strike rate that you want. It's like the conversion rate is horrid. Like there's still hope for them. They're both relatively new, but you do want to see them put a large percentage of their shots on goal and, of course, in the goal. Um, and Fabio has good. He's been very much involved in the attack, so that's good. But Klamala, for whatever reason, at least from the eye test, it seems like whenever the ball's passed to him, he seems to either miscontrol it or if he passes it, it gets taken away by the opposition. So that's pretty much my thoughts. But hopefully they.
No, yeah. No, 100% agree. And obviously, it's a bit concerning when both your strikers have a combined 7 goals. And well, obviously, we've had the privilege of having a certain Englishman in Bradley Wright Phillips who was always getting the goals in. And obviously, we're missing him deeply. And it pains me to see him, obviously, when he was at LAFC and now at Columbus, even getting the goals here. And obviously, it was nice to see him play at Red Bull Arena. And I thought he was going to score a point. But just coming over to you, Graham, obviously touching on Fabian Klimala still. Obviously, it's not working out as well as we all expected at the moment to only have 7 goals between them. But do you think it's something that could be sorted? Or obviously now with Fabio's loan is ending at the end of the season, can you see that partnership surviving to the end, like going into the 2022 campaign?
I mean, if we're talking about the eye test, I just think that Fabio's work rate really kind of boosts his stock. I just feel like he's all over the place. He's willing to do whatever he has to, which is it's kind of weird seeing him defending in the midfield as a striker, but he's willing to do that if he has to. I think I really think, Bryan talking about the eye test, to me, Fabio is the more committed of the two, and it's a shame that his loan is up. I have a feeling that they're just going to let it expire because I feel like at the beginning of the season, Kevin Thewell was just trying to plug as many holes as possible, knowing that he was going to offload, a lot of what we had. So, yeah, I mean, Klimala has been, in my opinion, really disappointing. I feel like he, not that I'm superstitious, but he almost jinxed himself by talking up goals and how he wants to just score goals. It feels like after that, even if you're watching him on the field, his body language, you can tell he's frustrated. He's really anxious to score. And I feel like with strikers, that can be a bad thing because you get so anxious to score that that's all you're fixated on. And on the flip side of that, Fabio is just looking to get someone to score. I don't think he's more selfless. His hold-up play is a lot better. His passing's kind of frenetic, but somehow it often finds it into the right spot. And then, like we're talking about BWP, we have his hold-up play was okay, but I don't think that's what he was known for. And you have a striker that's got excellent hold-up play. If we can find someone that has that killer instinct in front of goal like BWP had, where just get it somewhere at the goal mouth and he'll tap it in. But we spent all that money on Klimala. We're kind of stuck with him, aren't we? So, what you said, Ronnie, is true. They are both new to the league, and I think with all the influx in the MLS, I think we all know that it's difficult. Everybody is learning that it's not a league you're going to come into. Like, I'm blanking on his name right now, but Pipa Higuain was saying that, I thought I was just going to come over here, smoke a cigarette, and score goals. And, obviously it's not happening for him, and it's not happening for some of the Red Bulls that are coming from overseas. But, maybe they need an off season. It's hard to say, but it doesn't look good right now.
No, 100%. And what you allude to is very right. They're very two opposite players. You've got Fabio, who's going to run his socks off for the team, whereas Kamal is getting frustrated. You can see him lashing out on a few tackles. And coming to you, Anthony, obviously it's not planning out perfectly, but do you think there is a future for these two? And how do you think they've done in their debut season?
So it's been very bad for both of them thus far. I don't think you can mince words with that. When you're a striker and you are 20 games into a season and have less than 5 goals, when your team is relying on you to score those goals, it's bad. There's a defensive midfielder that has as many goals as these guys when it comes to Christian Cáceres. So from that sense, it's not good. What it means going forward, it's hard to say because Fabio is on loan. It really depends on what they want from him. If they want him to be a creator, an actual number 10, maybe a replacement for Kaku, I could see him doing that. I can't see him doing it in the formation that they're doing now, which is 2 strikers and the chaos in the midfield that currently exists. Klimala's job is to score goals. If he does not do that, if he is unable to do that, then they need to find another option. Right now, the big issue with the Red Bulls is they don't have anyone off the bench that can give them alternate options. In years past, there were not great options, but there was something. There was Brian White, there was Anatole Abong, there was Gonzalo Verón. There was all these kinds of pieces that could maybe give you something off the bench. Right now, you're stuck with Tom Barlow, and that's pretty much it. There are no alternatives from that point. So these guys were supposed to produce goals, and combined, they have less than 10 goals on the season, which is an incredible letdown. There's no way to say that. And the reason why they are in the point that they are is because they're not producing. This team has produced defensively even without Aaron Long. You look at some of the losses, a lot of the 1-0 losses. The idea is they would score more than they're scored against, and they just have not met expectations on that level.
No, 100% agree. And obviously, just touching on even when you're looking at the bench, and we're now relying on Danny Royer as a backup striker as well now due to a lack of depth. And obviously, some players like Tom Barlow, it doesn't work always going from the USL to the MLS. And sadly, it seems to be proving that at the moment. And obviously, letting Brian White go is looking a bit of a weird decision now, but obviously sometimes you make a good decision, sometimes you don't. But then just going into like some of the other players in the team, and I'm calling them the young guns at the moment. There's three in particular that I can't stop talking about, especially to a load of my English friends who don't really watch the MLS. And obviously they've all heard of Caden Clark now. That's all on their radar. But then I'm bringing two more to them, John Tolkien and Wilcom and Carmona. I'm a big fan of all three of them. And starting on John Tolkien, obviously coming in an 18-year-old at the beginning of the season with Gutman in front of him. I don't think anyone could expect such a lovely mullet to end up going bleach blonde and then just turn into be an absolute asset at left back. And it's clearly going to be another one of these players that European seems to be looking at. Going on to Carmona, obviously trained with Atletico Madrid before, and then we've picked him up, 18-year-old Venezuelan, and obviously Caden Clark, who's now departed to Leipzig, but on loan at the moment. These three players got such a potential. And coming to you, Graham, on this one, how good is it to see such a brilliant young core of players that actually sometimes is the main reason for watching the Red Bulls, especially like a season like this?
Well, it's interesting because, Tyler Adams talked a little bit about the next up mentality at the USMNT, and I feel like Red Bulls have had that mentality for a long time. And John told, Caden Clark had the appendectomy, obviously took a little bit to get back into the team. And then here's John Tolkien and Wiki Carmona, for that matter, both of them, sort of rising to the occasion. But yeah, I mean, the interesting thing to me is when Tolkien was playing midfield, just the eye test again, watching him play, he had flashes of Tyler Adams in that put out fires kind of way. His first goal was really, it reminded me of Tyler Adams coming back to cover for an outside back that had moved into the attack. And that's exactly what he was doing, bumps somebody off the ball and ends up on the other side and on the other side of it and scoring his first goal. I think he's a versatile player. Obviously, he played in the defense, played outside back, but then you slot him into the midfield, and I felt like he was drifting into the back a little too much, but then he scores that goal. So he's got good, in my opinion, just from the eye test, good box-to-box potential, especially if we're talking about defensive midfielder. Is he the next defensive midfielder for the Red Bulls? And but yeah, I mean, Caden Clark, it's kind of I don't know if it's the hangover from the big transfer, and obviously looking forward to that move and likely playing in Champions League, and that's a big jump for a player. But it's kind of concerning how he's fallen off. He wants to get, you can tell now that like he's fit, he's getting in the right positions. He just doesn't, he's not finishing like he used to. He's just a hair off. And if he can kind of find his form again and get back into the kind of shape that and performance that he was in April and May, then we might be able to salvage this season that looks like it's heading downwards. But yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know much about Wiki Carmona. He looks good. He's the type of player for me as a fan where I'm like, that's Wiki. Like he always shows up and I'm always surprised that he's in the position that he's in, and he seems to understand the moment a lot of the time. I almost feel like he doesn't get enough credit because everybody's talking about Tolkien right now. And before that it was Clark. But I think he's going to be a real asset, especially next year. Because there's bound to be some shuffling. We have a lot of players on loan that are likely to go back. So, but yeah, it's. I mean, they're players for the future. I think Tolkien is going to be really, really important next year when Caden leaves, and I think Wiki to that point is going to be important when we lose some of that winger depth. So.
No, yeah, brilliant. I think it's very similar. Like we can touch on a lot of things between John Tolkien and Tyler Adams. Obviously, coming in young, hungry as a fullback, moving into the midfield, and then everyone knows Tyler Adams now. We all love him. We all watch him, no matter if it's the Bundesliga, Champions League, US men's national team. He's doing us all proud of wherever he's playing. But just going on to you, Brian, especially with this young core of players, Do you think we're obviously relying on these too much at the age of what they are at the moment?
I've always, I've always been a supporter of the way the club is played. It's good to emphasize youth. They seem to they definitely have a direct path. It does feel like they can be supplemented by a more established talent at times, but for the most part, it's worked out. It is a bit frustrating when you see what the youth is there for. They're there to provide speed and agility and be able to close down the ball in the opponent's defensive third. And when the press is it not working like it has in the past, and opponents just, even clubs like Chicago or Cincinnati, easily carve through the press and dominate the midfield and are running around like they're Barcelona or something, like, it's kind of frustrating to see. So
yeah, 100%. 100%. I think that's one thing obviously comes with the youthful teams is the inexperience, especially in positioning, and that's where you do need these big guys along. And I think one thing what helped Tyler Adams, especially when he was coming through, he had the experienced guys that he could learn off in front of him. The right back slot obviously had Connor Lade there at the time, but also midfield having people like Dax McCarthy, Sasha Kleshton, Felipe are great assets to a team to have, especially young players. They look up to these players, and obviously at the moment our most experienced player is Sean Davis, who's playing every second of the season and is literally the most experienced player at 27 years old, I think he is, which shows you the actual lack of experience within the lineup. But just coming to you, Anthony, on this one, obviously we all want to see these young guys playing well, but would you like to see other people supplementing them and letting them learn off of them and going forward try and bring them up to a level and actually not always playing them, because sometimes at that young age you don't want them playing every minute of every game?
Absolutely. That's the thing this team is missing. When the new version of Red Bull kicked off in 2015, Sasha Kleshton was that middle guy, that guy that you could build off of, that helped everybody behind him, sometimes in front of him, the selfless guy. Kaku replaced him afterwards as that selfless guy who everything played through. We don't have that right now. The Red Bulls don't have that player that they can play through that makes the people in front or behind him look better. A lot of times it tends to be a veteran person, whether it's an international or it's an American who's come back from Europe or from wherever. They don't have that right now. I know that they thought they were going to have that this year. They thought they were going to have Kaku this year to be that catalyst for the offense. So it's a big issue that they have at the moment that they desperately need to address, because no team in MLS can be, especially if you're a quote unquote selling team, which I hate that term because I don't. In New York, you should never be a seller; you should be a buyer. But if you're going to be that and still be competitive in the league, you need that one player that is going to make everybody around them better. And unfortunately, they lost that over the Kaku issue that happened earlier this year, and they need to find a replacement.
No, 100%. That dreaded four-letter word comes up again, Kaku. We could speak on that for hours and hours, but moving on to some of the other parts of the team, and I see Graham just unmuted there, and I think he wants to say something on the Kaku gate. Was what I like to call it.
I was just wondering if anybody had heard anything. I haven't seen any reports about, obviously that they're trying to actually, litigate it. I was wondering if any of you had heard anything else on Kaku.
There is a litigation in place. The issue that happens is Americans, and this really comes down to the way American sports operate versus the rest of the world, and what are options in contracts here. There are things that happen in Europe that we are not accustomed to here. For instance, we have tampering here, and if anybody follows the NBA, everyone gets mad when LeBron James says the name of a player that does not play on the Lakers. In Europe, you can have this whole conversation that we've had for the last 2 weeks about Kylian Mbappe and Real Madrid, where everyone has said everything. That is 100% tampering in the United States, but it does not happen that way here. So It doesn't happen that way there. So it's a very different way of working everything. And I think that Kaku's people and him thought this through far differently than it actually happened. So now we're stuck in this legal loophole of the legal United States contract system versus whatever's happening over there. And at best, all it's going to be is a few $1 million coming the way of the Red Bulls. At worst, it's just a black eye for Major League Soccer because they lost a really, really talented player.
No,
Yeah, I don't
and
understand that.
no, it's 100% Brian. Come on.
Yeah, you're pretty much correct.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like one of the things I first learned when actually first looking into the MLS about 8-9 years ago was I was trying to work out the difference between obviously your European football and the American MLS, and there's so many swings and roundabouts that it took me a good few months just to even work out the trading, also the draft system, and then everything else, which was just so complicated. So I can understand if his lawyer or his agents just thought, actually, you know what, this is similar to Europe, and in Europe, a lot more goes what shouldn't go, especially like you say in the Mbappe and Real Madrid situation. And you have, for example, Cristiano Ronaldo, who's getting phone calls from Alex Ferguson, Rio Ferdinand, saying, "Oh, why don't you just come over here?" But obviously, it's a different story when it comes to America. And well, I'm personally a Lakers fan, so LeBron, you can mention as many people as you want. But moving on from tampering and then going on to obviously some of the other players that we've had this season, and just this could be an open question to all three of you. I'm going to start with you, Anthony. So far, if you had to pick two players that have impressed you the most this season, who would you actually say that would be?
Oh my goodness. I will say that Carlos Coronel, and I've been very critical of him at times this season, has had to deal with a lot more than I thought he would have to deal with. So I'm going to give one to him because he has had to really anchor a different backline game to game. And also Christian Cáceres, I think, has taken a incredible leap forward as an on-field leader. He is able to play an attacking role. He's able to play Gerhard Struber's, what I like to describe as chaotic midfield role, which is literally get in there and create chaos, but also be able to track back and cover his defensive duties. So I think those two players, more than anybody else in the team so far, have really been able to grow under Struber's regime.
No, brilliant. And moving on to you, Brian, the same question to you. Which two players have you found have actually impressed you the most so far in this bit of a miserable season?
I mean, it is kind of a small group, but even then, it's hard to choose. There's like a 4-way tie, I would say, at the top. But I think I have to go with we'll go with the players who have made the biggest jump or have surprised me. But Tom Edwards and Sean Nealis, I would have to say. Edwards has been just amazing, fighting for the club, fighting for the shirt, putting in a shift at right back and center back, stepping up when he's needed, and just doing whatever he's asked. And then Sean Nealis, he was good. He made a lot of progress last year in my viewpoint, deputizing for when either Aaron Long or Tim Parker couldn't go. Where he showed last year in 2020, he seemed to show well. There were a few hiccups, and then this year, because of the Long injury, because of a bunch of other injuries, Sean Nealis has really become like the main center back, and he earned his contract extension. So I've been pretty happy. And of course, I have to give honorable mentions to, like, again, Carlos Coronel, and then John Tolkien. They played pretty well. So yeah.
No, yeah, I just don't agree with you. Sean Nealis has definitely deserved his contract extension. Obviously, being a homegrown lad as well, it's always great to see one moving into the team. And I'm going to have to put Graham on the spot as well here, because we've had some honourable mentions and we've got 4 candidates so far. So are you going to put some new names in the hat, or are you going to echo someone else's opinion?
Well, the one player that really stood out to me in the beginning of the year was Andrew Gutman. I know he's a loanee, but he had flashes of Kemar Lawrence where he would shoot up the field. He was comfortable dribbling. He could dribble around people. He had no problems getting into the attack, and then somehow is able to get back, which not every Red Bull defender can do right now. But I mean, he's fast, he's smart, he's confident on the ball, and as much as I love Kyle Duncan, he's irresponsible with the ball a lot of times. He takes too many touches. He's still a great player. And I'm really, we're going to be sad to lose him at the end of the year. But in my opinion, if we could somehow find a way to pry Gutman away from Atlanta, I think it would be an excellent addition. I think it's going to fit in Struber's system. I think it'd be good for Gutman too. I think his stock is going to go up because I just think he fits the system. So he's to me, like, of everybody, he's the one that I really hope that we can hold on to. I hate to, like, when you first asked the question, Coronel was the one that popped into my head, and I went last, so I got to sweep up after everybody. But, but I don't understand why Red Bull fans have been so hard on him. When you look at the numbers, he's an excellent goalkeeper, Montreal game aside. I mean, he very nearly stopped 3 penalties. He at least stopped 2, save for jumping off the line, which is incredible. But yeah, I mean, he's been, when you look at how we're winning games, which a lot of times is only by a goal, a lot of it comes down to a big save that he's made. And we had that for so long. We had a rock in goalkeeper, and last year was, for a lot of reasons, last year was really, really kind of up in the air in goal between Mira and I'm blanking on his name right now, but the other goalkeeper, Jensen, thank you, David Jensen, who's now been loaned out. But yeah, Coronel has, if not for the absolute collapse of the defense, I think that he would be, one of the, probably on the outside of goalkeeper of the year, maybe not winning it, but at least being mentioned in that conversation. And hopefully if we can get a more consistent back line together and get some more chemistry, maybe his stock improves too.
The one thing I would say, his mistakes. So this is the one thing about Cornell, and it's not on him. It's about goalkeepers in general. He makes highlight reel mistakes, and they don't happen often, but they happen often enough that they are like Sports Center, like ESPN FC, like catastrophic mistakes. And so I think a lot of fans end up putting that on him as something that happens all the time, which it doesn't. But the mistakes, like especially the near post stuff, which has always been his problem historically, like near post saves that you're just like, why didn't you save that? Why couldn't you make that happen? He does let by. And that's where I think his defense lets him down. They need to understand where he needs more help, whereas I think he understands where the team needs more help, and I think they need to really back him up a little bit more.
No, yeah, 100% agree with you there. And obviously everyone's got honorable mentions, but from my perspective, I'm going to go biased with one of them, and obviously it's going to be Tom Edwards. Someone to be on loan to show so much passion has been great to see, and obviously he's been so versatile in playing at right back, centre midfield, playing in a back 5, playing in a back 4. He's been doing very well, and obviously it's going to be a tricky situation at the end of the year to see if we can get him off Stoke City, but it'd be a good one to see.
But can he do it in a rainy night in Harrison?
He kind of reminds me of I don't know if you guys watch Ted Lasso, but he reminds me of Roy Kent all the time. He looks like him. He has that same kind of attitude. He's like always stoic. That's how I get my wife calls him Roy Kent now, because I'm like, doesn't he kind of look like Roy Kent?
No, yeah, we do love a bit of Tom Edwards over here in RBNY UK, and even if for some reason he does end up at Stoke, hopefully he plays in a London game and I can get something signed by him along the line somewhere. But I think my second one has been announced so far. I think obviously this is going to cause some controversy somewhere in the Red Bull world, and it's a certain midfielder called Sean Davis. There's been people obviously slating him during the season, but also praising him. And I think I've been trying to praise him a lot this season because he's been played every single second of our campaign this year. He's been a rock in front of that defence, but also he's been doing 2 to 3 people's jobs most of the time this season, and it's really been showing. Like he's the most experienced player in our squad, and he's been showing his experience as captain as well. He seems to be a really good guy to have around the camp. Well, everything I've come out from the camp, everyone said the same thing. It's a brilliant asset to have in the team, and I think it's another player that can just easily slip under the radar because you don't really notice them until they're not there. And obviously, because he's been there every game, he's just been going on. You look at the team sheet, right? Captain Davis again, but be one of them where obviously we'll miss him for a game, and then everyone might be like, "Oh, actually, you know what? We do miss him." And I think my two would have to be Tom Edwards and Sean Davis. Sean Davis, just for the fact of he needs a bit more credit for the season he's having. I think that's fair to say. And just touching on Sean Davis, actually perfect make way into the next discussion. Obviously, he's now captain as well. Obviously, having another leader of Aaron Long alongside, like just behind him would have been great, but obviously it's not happening this year. And obviously, it's been a mixed bag of reviews from this season. I'm going to go to you first on this one, Bryan. Sean Davis, obviously, sometimes could be a bit like Marmite, what we have over here. You either love him or you hate him kind of thing. But how do you sit with Sean Davis and this season and also having him around the squad?
Yeah, he's definitely come along as captain. He's kind of found his voice, especially this season. I see the thing. It's a strange one because like I have been watching this team a long time, and when he like as he's progressed through the years, like 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, so on and so forth, he never really struck me as a traditional like defensive midfielder, but it seems like he always seems more of a box-to-box player. But this season, at the base of the diamond midfield, it seems like he's kind of embraced that role, and especially his defensive skills and his marking and his tackling have made a lot of progress, especially this season. And then, of course, those times where there were red cards and you had to deputize on the back line. So yeah, I've been very happy with his play this season. So yeah.
No, yeah, brilliant. And coming on to you, Graham, on this one, we've seen him grow a lot as a player. And like what I said before on Tyler Adams, he had the right players there to learn off. But it's great to have a player like him in our team, especially in a season like what we're having.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like over the years, Sean Davis has always had a subdued role in the Red Bulls system. He's an important player to the system and to the flashier players that maybe get more of the limelight. He's sort of the anchor that you don't really see, but is important to the way the system works. And obviously, last year under Armis, there was no real system, so he was kind of in no man's land. And I don't think he's an agent of chaos. I think he's an agent of control. He's somebody that you have on the field to, keep things under control. My big gripe with Sean Davis, I just don't feel like he's a natural born leader because of that. He's a behind the scenes guy. He's the kind of guy that everybody respects because he just keeps his head down and does the work. So I feel like it's a lot to put on someone like Sean Davis. Watching his pep talks that he gives, I feel like they're the same. I could probably recite them. He just doesn't exude like leadership. And it's not that he's a bad player and it's not that he's not a leader, but like that, thinking about someone like Dax McCarty or Luis Robles or even BWP or Sasha Kleshin, those kind of players that just sort of fill the room by themselves. And Sean Davis is not that guy. And I don't think that's necessarily a discredit to him, but I sort of feel like if they had a natural born leader in that position on the team, would they be in a better spot? Because Sean Davis could still do what he does, which is important to the team, but you have someone else that can fill that real leadership role. So that's how I feel about Sean Davis.
No, yeah, 100% agree. And just touching on that, I think we've definitely seen it this year where we've had the inexperience, like the lack of actual people to have alongside him, where we've had a bit more attacking players. The team's more built around attacking players in that position. Obviously, we lost Diarra through injury. He's only played 42 minutes, I think, over the whole season, which has not been ideal, but something you have to work with. And coming over to you, Anthony, on Sean Davis, obviously, he's a player that has been at Red Bull Arena for a very long time now and has earned the respect that he gets in the team. And some say doesn't do the job that everyone expects. But I think you've got to cut him some slack, especially this season with the lack of players around him helping him out on the defensive side of midfield.
So I completely disagree that he is not a natural born leader. I think he is. He is not the boisterous, rah captain that Red Bull fans have been accustomed to over the last 6 to 7, maybe even 10 years if you think about going all the way back to Juan Pablo Angel. But like he gets it done where he needs to do it. He does talk backstage to the players. He's an incredible mentor to the younger players. And what he does is he leads by example on the field. He does the job that needs to be done. That doesn't mean that it's the most exciting job that needs to happen, but he makes it work where he needs to make it work. And I think that a lot of the younger players do take after that. And I know for a fact that that's the case because I've talked to some of the players. And Sean Davis is a fantastic example in that. Now, is he the guy that you want to be captain to get them to an MLS Cup? I can't answer that question. But I can tell you that for the guys that are in that locker room right now, he is a fantastic leader. Whether or not the coaching staff meets that is another question entirely.
No. Yeah, just touching on the coaching staff, and it's going to be our next topic. I'm going to mention a certain word beginning with the letter I, and it is none other than identity itself. And obviously, when Gerhard Struber first came in, we really found a certain way of playing, and it was all looking good. His lovely AlphaTauri sweatshirt, I was trying to buy him, I couldn't find him anywhere. And we've now lost the AlphaTauri sweatshirts, and we seem to have lost all the wins as well, which is a bit of a coincidence. So I think if I can find one, I might send him one that way, even though Jesse Marsh has probably bought the stock because I now see him wearing them every game at Leipzig. And I think it's a massive talking point, especially for Struber. Some fans are saying, is it time for him to go? Do you give him another year? It's a very, very interesting talking point. I think this is going to be our main one of this podcast. It's what do we think about Struber? But also, how long do you give him? Personally, I've said this on previous podcasts that yes, the aim this season was to make playoffs. It was never to win the Supporters' Shield. It was never to be challenging for that. But it was always you make the playoffs. It's not the end of the season. There's still a long way to go. But we do need to pick up results soon. So I don't think it's a case of we will be getting rid of Struber unless something happens and another team shows interest, which sometimes you can't help. But I definitely see him being here at the beginning of next year and then seeing how it materializes on with maybe a few more additions. Some of these younger players have grown up a bit more. Getting Aaron Long back, who's one of the best centre halves in the MLS with no shadow of doubt, who could have gone to Europe, stayed behind, sadly ruptured Achilles at the end of the year, which was terrible. I'm going to start with Graham here with the man, the myth, the legend, Gerhard Struber. I love the style of play, but what is happening at the moment for it not to be like how it was?
I mean, one thing I feel like you can't mention their troubles right now without keeping in mind that at one point they had like 4 defenders on the whole roster available. There were serious injury issues in the defense, and defense has been if you think historically, it's an incredibly important role. You need to have a specific skill set in the Red Bull defense for them to press the way that they want to press, and Amro Tarek ain't it. The guy's got heart, but he is not fast enough. And Sean Nealis is good when he's healthy, but when he was out, Tom, a huge credit to Tom Edwards because he was filling in everywhere and happy to do it. But you need more than Tom Edwards, and I feel like that has something to do with it. My good friend Matt Sia brought up in one of his articles recently that part of the reason, and it's a good point that I hadn't thought of, is that Armas was constantly tinkering with the lineup unnecessarily last year, even when people were healthy, constantly moving. And the Red Bulls have had to do it this year out of necessity. And it seemed like when you think about some of Caden Clark's first goals and all of the things that had to happen leading up to them, everybody in sync and everybody knowing where the ball needs to be, and the chemistry that the team had early on, then everybody's getting injured, and that chemistry's out the door. And it's hard. You have so many, it gets brought up a lot, but it's worth mentioning. It bears repeating. You have a lot of players that have not from the United States, never played here before. They've got to adjust to, you go back, COVID, that's still around. So that's still looming in the background. So you have to adjust to a new country, you have to adjust to a new language, you have to adjust to MLS, which has not been kind to many international transplants. I really think it's sort of the hubris of people that come into MLS and they think they're going to dominate and they get smacked in the face and they realize, oh, this is more of a challenge than I thought. And I think Gerhard Struber is getting that smack right now. You know, you can't say that it's not for lack of investment. You can't say that he hasn't been able to get the players that he wants, because I think they're up to 12 players in now, and we're almost 12 players out. So I think it's just an adjustment period. Kevin Thelwell finally admitted that it's a rebuild at halftime of the Chicago match, after at the beginning of the season saying it's not a rebuild. Now all of a sudden he's backpedaling and saying, "Oh, we need time," and he's right. They need time. So I mean, I'm still high on Gerhard Struber. I like his intensity, and I think they're moving in the right direction. I mean, even just watching Struber's Red Bulls face Armis's Toronto team, and just being able to see the players know where they need to be. There's a system in place for Red Bull, you know, even just down to the eights recognizing when the outside backs go that they need to drop back, and simple things that people know what they need to do. It's just a matter of getting skilled players and players that have adjusted to the system to actually do what they need to do. So I think he needs more time.
No, yeah, 100% do agree. And there's been so many factors, and coming over to you, Bryan, there's so many factors that have gone against him, and it's never easy just having one of these. An injury crisis by itself is bad enough. A pandemic is unheard of. Also, coming over, the players got to learn a new system coming from other countries. Do you think it's just a case of, obviously we are officially in a rebuilding process, do you think he is the right man for this rebuilding process?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still high on him. I've seen a bunch of the Once the Metro articles about the interest from various English and European clubs and wherever. So I mean, I think he stays. Unless he takes a job somewhere else, which I don't think is going to happen. But yeah, I definitely see him staying at least one more year. Of course, the results of this season might shorten the leash a little bit. I could see if the team gets off to a bad start next season that they might pull the trigger before the end of next season. But you know, I mean, it is kind of ironic and frustrating in a few ways. It's ironic because of they spent a ton of transfer money, and this could ironically be the first year in over a decade where they missed the playoffs. It's frustrating because I mean, the last time I remember the club playing a complete game where they just dominated from minute 1 to minute 90 was in 2019. So every I mean, they have had their successes, but it's always been a 1-0 result or a scrappy performance or a comeback win. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's you ideally want to be having those performances where everything's clicking and you're able to put clubs away and there's no doubt. So that's just my thought.
No, yeah, and I think so far everyone's echoed the same point of there's a reason why European teams are looking at Struber, and coming over to you, Anthony, that he is held in high regard, especially obviously his time at Barnsley, obviously his prior association with Salzburg, so the Red Bull group knew what it was about, and it's now officially a rebuild. Last time we was on the podcast, we were saying, is it a rebuild or not? Obviously now it's officially a rebuild. Is there anything you can say about Struber that you'd think that, oh no, he's not the right person, but I think it's going to be a consensus here that he is getting the team where he wants it, but it's just been so many factors that has brought him to a position where he couldn't successfully do what he wanted to do?
So based on MLS salary, this is not a rebuild. There's no way this is a rebuild. With what they paid for so many different players, there's no amount of spin that Thelwell or anybody can say that this is a rebuild. Now, they can say that they did not meet expectations, and that's 100% fine because they have not been. But the amount of, in 2020, if they would have said this is a rebuild, they would have been 100% right. They did not make significant investments in the team to push it forward. They relied on what was there. And they could have said all of that and said, hey, we're evaluating, we're looking to see what happens, blah, 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 blah. They brought a significant amount of players, many of which who have not seen time on the field. People like Cameron Harper, DR for injuries, a lot of other people that have not seen significant time on the field. I refuse to believe that this is a rebuild year. And when they say that, it angers me as a fan, because it insults my intelligence of what exactly it is that they're presenting in front of. Just tell me you screwed up. Like, so for instance, in New York sports, I'll give a great example. The New York Rangers in hockey have been really great at this lately. They've literally put their hands in the air to the fans and said, you know what? We screwed up. We're going to rebuild. We're going to blow the whole thing up, and we're going to let you know how this goes. Cool. Fine. I'm glad that you guys communicated that to me. I'm glad that you told me you screwed up. But for the Red Bulls to say this is now a rebuild, when they went on and got Klamala, when they went on and they did that loan deal, which was a loan to buy in essence for Fabio, when they went out and they got people like Frankie Amaya and Reyes and all these players, you weren't thinking of this as a rebuild. You don't get those kinds of players to be a rebuild team. You get the kind of players that FC Dallas got. So the idea that this is a rebuild, this is not a rebuild. This is a failure is what this is thus far this year. And it's fine to acknowledge that. And that sits on, because in MLS, because of the salary restraints, a lot of this will sit on the coach, because the coach a lot of times is the highest paid person on the team unless you have a big DP. It is on them to figure that out. And right now, this 100% sits on Gerhard Struber to make sure that this works as a playoff team. If they do not make the playoffs, this is an epic failure. They have to make the playoffs, period, or he should not come back next year.
Very, very good words there. And I think Graham's good. I can see Graham's brain ticking over waiting to say that.
I hear what you're saying, but what is to me, like you actually kind of said it in your response of like basically somebody saying blow it up. And I mean, if losing 12 players, which is, that's a lot of, to me, that's a lot of turnover. And for a soccer team, it may not be for a football team, but for a soccer team to lose 12 players, that's a lot, especially in a system that is, I mean, Red Bull 2 is pretty depleted. So to turn over 12 players over the course of 6 months, 8 months.
Red Bull 2 is a different thing entirely. That's
true.
The whole podcast entirely.
Yeah.
Red Bull 2 hasn't been lighting it up either, which is unfortunate.
Yeah,
100%.
But point being is that, I mean, to me, a rebuild is somebody saying, you know what, like we're gonna have to gut some of this team and bring in some new people and try and make this work. And to me, like the amount of loans that they have, I mean, it's one thing if they get a bunch of people. They went out and buy a lot of people. But I mean, how many players on the team right now are on loan? I mean, they stand to lose a whole bunch more players this year at the end of the season if they're not able to work out some of these loan terms. And now you haven't even, now you have to basically do it all over again in the winter transfer window to plug these holes. And like we said, like there's not the talent coming through RB2 right now.
But that's still while working the system essentially, and what you end up doing with a lot of those loans, especially look this team like Gutman and a lot of people like Fabio, you can't just buy them and bring them in because in MLS the salary restrictions, I'll just say it stupidly, make it that you can't just buy these players when you're in such a big market. So a lot of these loans, which I fully agree with Elwell, made sense when they were brought in, were in essence a way to find the right fit, keep some, drop others. Is totally a great way to go about doing it. However, Struber has not found the way to make the winning formula with these players, which we well, maybe we don't agree with the talent moving forward, but the talent behind the strikers have been doing the job, because this team has not lost by 3 goals, I think, at any point this season. They've been able to do it behind the ball, but it's moving forward that's been the big problem. And Struber needs to make that work. That's what he's there to do. And if he can't do that, I really don't think he should be here next season for that to happen.
No, yeah, definitely.
Congratulations. Go throw your hands up at that Elton John stand and enjoy Watford.
No, yeah, I think especially just touching on that, especially it's up front where the problem is. And when you have 3 strikers, including Tom Barlow, Kamara, and Fabio, have got 8 combined goals in the MLS this season, you've got strikers near enough scoring double already, and that was just one by himself. But I'm looking at the table here, and it's not right. It sounds all doom and gloom, but I'm going to try and put that little bit of sunshine in the corner, only a little bit. So we're currently sitting on 22 points, which is obviously not great. We played 20 games, and we're looking at the last playoff spot in the East at the moment, which is DC, who we play next. They're 8 points difference, and we've got 2 games in hand. So when you actually look into it and you think, right, if we do manage to get the 3 points against them this weekend, it closes down to 5, and you still got the 2 games. Yes, the 2 games that were called off are very difficult, with one of them being the Hudson River Derby game. But they are 2 home games, which in an ideal world, in a normal season, we'd be looking at that thinking, right, that's a very good chance of getting 6 points there. So there's still a chance at the end of this season where we could be pushing for them last couple of playoff spots. But obviously, once you start pushing up the league, you've got New England, who are well clear in the East. They're 14 points clear of the East, which is crazy. They've done a brilliant job on recruitment. We've seen it when we played them this season. They look very good. But it's not all doom and gloom. And I think that's what I'm going to touch on next, is the actual expectations for the rest of the season. For me personally, it's DC is the rivalry. Fair enough, people say with the Smurfs across New York and now in Harrison or wherever they're going to play, wherever they find a home, DC is the one that I look at. This is the one I want to win. And this Saturday was such a big one, obviously, being on 9/11 as well. We want the team to do us proud, but also this could be the catalyst for the rest of the season. I think that's the major thing going forward. So my expectation is let's get these 3 points against DC. Now we're looking up. We're close to these playoffs. We win these games in hand. It's in our hands. We can do this. Try and get some confidence into players, which will come. Players are coming back from injury. We've had rests over the international break, not had many players involved in all the international duties. So these players are going to be fresh, which is going to be great. Good thing for everyone based in the UK is it actually is being shown, the DC game, which is actually a midnight kickoff for us Saturday going into Sunday on Free Sports, which is brilliant. But it's going to be a tricky one, DC. They're going to bring everything to the game. So I'm going to start with you, Graham, on this. Do you think there is a little bit of light at the end of that tunnel? It might be a very long tunnel at the moment. It might be all dark and gloomy. It might have even been flooded at some point. But is there a light at the end of that tunnel for this season?
Well, I mean, DC, I feel it's interesting to say, since there's been so much turnover and there are so many foreign players in the club, and the DC, because of proximity, the NYCFC matchup is seen as sort of the premier, rivalry, and the DC rivalry has kind of gone by the wayside. But you have to think that the Rebels are going to be up for this one. I mean, it is a rivalry with a name to it, the Atlantic Cup. So, I mean, it's got a ton of history. So you think that, like you said, Ronnie, you think that they're going to be up for this one. They're going to be at home. They've had plenty of rest at this point. So you think that they're going to be up for this one and they can squeak out a win. And honestly, I don't care if it's 1-0, just something. But you look at the rest of the schedule, you've got Columbus, who anybody can beat Columbus, even at home right now. You've got Miami, which they should be able to beat as well. NYCFC at home, and I feel like no matter how bad the season is going, that is always, always a match that they are up for. They've got them back to back too, and then they go across the Hudson and play them in that postage stamp over there at Yankee Stadium. And then you've got Philly, and I feel like if they can somehow manage to get 4 results there, Philly is kind of backsliding right now too. Can they get a win there? I feel like it's not impossible when you look at the rest of the season. NYCFC matches, they've got to play them 3 times. They're just different. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's on the Red Bulls. They're just different matches. They just play differently. Um, there's reason to believe that they can turn it around. I don't know if they beat Nashville, but these are winnable games. This is a salvageable season. They've just got to be up for it, and they've got to find a way to reignite that chemistry from the beginning of the season. Klimala's got to start scoring goals, and Caden Clark's got to find his feet. And I don't think that's impossible. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion at this point. But it doesn't take too many losses before the wheels fall off, and you might as well just bring the bunch of the Red Bull 2 guys up and get them minutes, and call it a season. So, but I think it's totally possible, and if we can start with DC, I think there's reason to believe we can win in Columbus. Miami, I feel like anybody can beat, and at that point now, if you get 3 wins and you're facing NYCFC at home, you have to believe that there's a good chance there. So.
No, yeah, definitely. And I think we're obviously on a tipping point at the moment where we can start clawing it back, or it's just going to slip away and it's going to build out. And coming over to you, Brian, obviously there is some light at the end of summer. We can see it, but do you think it's a realistic goal now to think, yes, we can just make that 6th or 7th spot in the playoffs and actually get into the postseason in the arguably one of the worst seasons to date?
Yeah, I mean, like as you said, they're only eight points or so from the line. I always go into every match when I'm following the team. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. I always think that they can get a result or get a good result or things like that. Like a lot of the players have been new and have been young, so there is hope that maybe their earlier struggles have just been from either a new environment or inexperience, and hopefully they can put it together at the end of the season. And that especially goes for the strikers. Hopefully they can start finding the net. But yeah. I definitely feel that they can get over the line and they can make the playoffs.
No, 100%. And I think touching on Graham and his love of Ted Lasso, a certain episode was it's the hope that kills you. So is it the hope that's going to kill us at the end of the season, Anthony?
I hope not. I think that this team is far more talented, just raw talent-wise, player-wise, than both DC and Montreal, who are sitting in 7 and 6. I'm surprised we're even at the point that we are right now. I could understand if we were in the lower part of the playoff pool, but when I look at Montreal, and I've watched a lot of Montreal games this year, and DC as well. DC is incredibly well coached, but when I see the raw talent on the field, Red Bull is leaps and bounds better than them. But they're not showing it in these games, and they need to start showing it, especially against DC, their biggest rival. I don't want to hear about the Hudson River Derby. It is essentially a created rivalry that MLS really, really love to push. DC is the ultimate rival of this team. It has been that way since 1996. You cannot lose this game. You have to win it, and Red Bull needs to boost their season and essentially use DC as a stepping stone into the playoffs this weekend.
No, I'm certain. I think we all have agreed on the point that this is the biggest game so far this season. It's going to go one of two ways. We're going to either get the confidence, push forward, and then we're all going to be thinking of this podcast, thinking, well, we were talking about the rubbish, about how we're not doing all this and do that. But hopefully it's going to be more positive. And the dreaded thing that I always have to ask everyone who comes on this podcast is a certain thing about predictions. And not it's going to escape any of you three for joining, especially Graham and Brian being their first one. So we're going to start with you, Brian. What is your prediction for the score, and how do you think it's going to go for DC this weekend?
Oh, wow. I'm gonna go 2-0 win for the Red Bulls, and with a goal from a Caden Clark screamer and an Andres Reyes header off a corner.
Wow, you called your shots.
Holy moly!
Right, so I'm definitely 100% snatching your hand off that one. I'm taking that 100%. I think it's up to you, Graham. Are you going to keep this hope alive? Are you?
Brian, if you somehow nail that prediction, I will buy you a beer.
All right.
That's incredible. I went modest with my what I'm going to do. I think it's a 2-win game, a 2-1 Red Bull win. I think DC is going to make it uncomfortable. They always do, even when they're not good. I mean, just like NYCFC, it's a different match. Everybody plays differently in it, no matter how good or bad their season is going. But I still think Red Bulls find a way to get it done. I think DC makes it uncomfortable, but I think we eventually get the job done and come out of Harrison with a 2-1 win.
So we've got 2 wins so far. Anthony, you going to keep this up? You going to keep the 3?
Yeah, why would I say it wouldn't be a win? I see this as a 1-0 win, mainly because I don't trust the strikers. But I'm not going to go as far as Brian is telling you who's going to score the goals. But I do think that the defense will be able to keep DC at bay. I think there'll be too much chaos in the midfield for DC to make it happen. So yeah, 1-0 New York Red Bulls boost their season this weekend and get themselves back on the playoff track.
Brilliant. And I'm going to have to echo the thoughts of everyone else. I'm actually going to say I'm going to be Bryan and Graham here. I've actually got 2-1. I think we might go behind and take it back. But I don't know. I'm not calling a goal scorer, but I really do fancy Sean Davis soon. He's going to get one. I've said this near enough every podcast, and I've been wrong all the time this season. So he's going to get one soon. And I think we're all looking forward now to the game on Saturday, which is 7 p.m. Eastern time or midnight here in the lovely islands of Britain, which we can be seeing on Free Sports. But that is coming to the end of this podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to have everyone on. So I'm just going to say it individually. Brian, thank you for making your debut on the RBNY UK podcast. We'd love to have you on very soon again.
Yeah, it was excellent.
And anytime you've answered, just let us know. Graham, don't worry, it is your debut as well. I would love to present everyone with an award, but the postage is too much, so that's my excuse. But thank you very much for coming on today, and echo the same thing. You're always welcome here, and you're always a part of the RBNY UK family.
Thanks for having me, Ronnie.
Always a pleasure. And then Anthony, all our listeners have heard you before on the podcast. It's always been a pleasure. We hope to get you on very soon, and hopefully you can sort that basement out as well very soon. That'd be a good thing to hear on the next podcast.
Oh, I hope so. I'm looking forward to having some hot water in the next few days.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on that. We hope that everyone is recovering from whatever you went through during that, and hopefully the Red Bulls can bring you some cheer going into the weekend against DC. So thank you very much for joining us on this episode of the RBNY UK podcast in partnership with Big Apple Sports Network, where they'll be bringing you all the latest news and views from all the teams in the tri-state area. But from this week, come on, you Red Bulls, let's beat that DC.